Yes. No.
Since I may or may not have cell service, if issues, I may just call in for meeting but not for commission.
Got it.
We're ready to go.
Ready to
Okay.
go.
We're going to start our work session with the City of Boise, giving an update for us on the 11th Street concept study. Thank you very much for coming. It's good to see you.
Madam President, Commissioners, Director, thanks for having us this morning. My name is Zach. This is Dr. with CCDC. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. We spoke with your executive team earlier in January on this topic, and they were kind enough to work us onto a schedule here, and we'd just like to share some information similar to what we shared with that team back in January about this really important project. Really looking forward to partnering with ACHD and ITD on this moving forward.
Well, we look forward to hearing the update.
Great. So I've about 8 minutes of slides to share, and feel free to bring up questions along the way. And Zach, please chime in if I missed anything or make promises you can't deliver. Just like to share with you project overview, who's involved, what our approach is, kind of general schedule, and discuss the touch points with you throughout this process and the right way to work through this together. The map on the right-hand side of the screen is a general overview of the project location and extents. And you may remember in October approving a concept design for the 11th Street Bikeway from Heron Street to State Street. This downtown segment would go from Washington Street to River Street. So the project overview, as you remember, with the approval in October, there was a direction for ACHD staff to work with the city, CCDC, and ITD on a further study of this, what we're referring to as the downtown segment of 11th Street. So we've been working with your staff as well as ITD on putting together a project approach, and that's what we're here to share today. The objectives that we've set for this are lead with public engagement, make sure that it's that which informs the concept design. It's important that what we come up with meets the requirements of not only ACHD but ITD and the city as well. The objective here is to develop a bikeway plan that meets the serves all ages and abilities, and with that it also needs to be balanced with a wide array of public interest. So insert on-street parking here, right? This is kind of the big nut to crack in this, is making sure that the business community as well as the cycling community are supportive of what's created or contemplated at this point. And then as part of this process too, we'll also be establishing probable costs of the project and an implementation strategy of the best way to move forward together. So who's involved? We're kind of looking at this in 4 groups. The first is interagency advisory team. We'll just refer to that as the advisory team because it's kind of a mouthful. On that we'll include Ryan Head from your staff, Justin Price, staff engineer at ITD, Zach from the city, as well as myself, and Amy Thimble, who's project manager at CCDC as well, who's also present here in the audience today. Additionally, we'll also have representatives from some ACHD bicycle advisory groups, Cody Boyce and Gary Seegers.
You forgot Tim.
Tim Kearns.
And Tim. Sorry, Tim. This week we went through, we just finished the selection process for consultant. We solicited 3 proposals, received 2, and Kittleson was above and beyond most informed and best qualified to do this work, we felt. And I think part of that is their work with your agency on the northern segment just last year. So we've been working to establish a stakeholder list or focus group list, and this will be an important part of the project. And at this point we have identified all the property owners along the corridor as well as the businesses that are operating within those properties. And with Kittleson on board, we'll begin to go knock on doors and make phone calls and invite folks to participate. Yeah, we see this as really an essential part of this project because these are the folks who are gonna help us understand what those hyper-localized issues are and what the priorities need to be, and making sure everybody stays satisfied. And then additionally, the general public's very important here. This is, reaching out to the cycling community as well as, the general motorists and just folks who are interested in the project. So we'll have information about the project available on CCDC's, cities, and ACHD's websites. We appreciate Director Wong's offer to have information on the ACHD website because it will help make sure that it reaches your general audience as well and that everybody stays informed about it. In addition, we'll do some open houses and pop-up street events similar to what was done last year on the northern segment, as well as online comment map and at least 2 rounds of engagement so that folks have the opportunity to help shape this plan at the right times in this process. So the proposed approach, from our perspective, what your staff did on the northern segment was really successful, so kudos to them. It was an inclusive and informative process, and it garnered good results. So we're modeling this process after that, right? If it works, don't fix it. So really the theme behind that is engage stakeholders early and often. So that really will kick off our first step of public engagement, of going and listening to identify what those priorities and issues are.
Organically grows from.
Yep. And so then the consultant will put together a report, and we'll share that with the advisory team, and we'll really be relying on that advisory team to be the hub of communication to respective organizations and making sure that folks are involved along the way. And then we'll take back out to the general public as well as focus groups, concept design with alternatives and areas where those are necessary to understand if we've understand what's working and what's not with the design essentially. And from that, the consultants will then report back to the advisory team, revise the design for concept, and then bring that back to you and other governing bodies as soon as August of this year. So our general schedule, we're looking to get started here in the next week or so with Kittleson. We're negotiating that contract now, and they'll be on their way with data collection. Our first advisory team meeting will be in April. The middle one will be probably mid to late May, and then the final in July. And then I mentioned beginning of approval process in August. So what does that design approval process look like? We think that it will require CCDC board approval, a city design review application, staff review, and city council approval. Approval from you all, the ACHD commission, and then we had a great meeting with Caleb Lakey, who's the new ITD District 3 engineer, last week, and in that discussion he felt as though a staff level approval from ITD would be sufficient for this project. However, he did reserve the right to take it to commission if during the process that was deemed necessary, but Zach, I think we all felt as though staff is probably appropriate for this project with ITD. So that's generally, the overview of where we are and where we're headed. We're happy to take any questions that you might have this time, and interested in hearing from you on when you'd like us to come back and what time in the process is a good time to be here.
Anybody have any questions?
No, it's good. I'm glad this is moving forward. I assume you're you say that collecting data points, a variety of data points on the return on the investment in that, both in terms of safety as well as economic return. It's not just about.
Yeah, a big part of the data collection will be parking analyses to determine how utilized those parking stalls are over the course of this time.
Yeah, and I know there's analyses in other cities where enhanced corridors, multimodal corridors, there's actually data points that say this is what you can expect a return to the tax base and to the business community when you have robust multimodal activity on a corridor, and I assume that comes into play, so it's not more than just like a parking place, it's really about an enhanced economic corridor.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. That's an excellent point. Matt Edmond and our office over at CCDC shared some of those reports in other communities, and we're reading through those and understanding what would be good data points to get from the business community to understand, does this influence their business and in what ways? Is it positive, is it negative? Because that is an important part of what we're doing here.
I like that you're gonna be doing that robust outreach, because I think that that's the critical step right there. Get all that input, and then that kind of sets your pace going forward. But it's important to hear from those stakeholders and the people that are there. I would say boots on the ground 24/7, so I think that's critical, so I'm glad to see that you're starting that process. Commissioner Coulthard?
I'm glad you're going to River Street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Madam President?
Yeah. Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, I think it's great. I'm in favor of the project, but I do want to get on record that I still believe CCDC should be fronting all the costs for this, and ACHD should not have to pay anything.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Any other questions? No? Just look forward to staying engaged and giving these updates and seeing how everything progresses and moves forward, and appreciate you coming in.
Great. Thanks for your time.
You bet. All right, now we'll shift gears.
That could have been awkward.
Yeah.
So
Ryan, oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Commissioners, if I could, before Ryan starts, today is a very special day. We start running around 3:30 today. This is Ryan's 10th anniversary today here at Data County Highway District. So of course we put him in front of the seat, in the hot seat, just to celebrate.
Hope it holds up for you there. So we'll turn it over to you now for your update.
Thank you, President, Commission. I'm here today with Christy Enselman, who's really our resident expert on the integrated 5-year work plan. But apparently we're putting into the corner, but as Doug said, to make sure I don't say anything wrong. So we're here today in our third of a series of presentations on the integrated 5-year work plan for this year's update. The first of those was on our annual report, and we have a copy there on your desk just as a reminder of what that says, and how it shows kind of what the build-out network would look like. Last month we talked to you about community programs and the outreach process associated with that. I'm here to tell you that that is in full swing. It is, we have done a lot of outreach via social media. It is a banner at the top of our page. We're preparing for next week's public open house on the 12th. Here in the auditorium, and all of that gearing towards that March 20th deadline. We're working with all of our partners and have reached out to them as well. And we've received one of those lists. We're still working on getting the rest of those. We've even done some additional outreach to Boise State. So there's a lot of efforts in the works, and continue to encourage others to participate in that process. But really today we're here to listen to you. We're here to reaffirm what you've told us in the past and get any input on if there are any changes to be made to what you've told us in the past related to the goals and the programming that's done. This is not a revenue discussion today per se. That's still to come. We've tried to do those two together in the past, and it doesn't always work out exactly the way that we'd hope. And so we wanted to come just listen today and hear what you have to say regarding the targets. We'll bring that back as we talk about revenue and do some checking to see. That way when you talk about revenue, you can check and see, are we able to meet the goals based on the discussion of those revenue projections. But talking about what our programming targets, really, that's what they are. We have multiple programs within the integrated 5-year work plan. You have your capital improvement program, your community programs, your bridges, your maintenance, etc. And we have a target, or is what we call it, ultimately a funding goal for each of those programs. And as a commission, you set those for us. You tell us how much you would like us to be investing. We try to give you good information to support that, but ultimately we look to you, and that's why we're here today, to listen to that. We consider a target met in the integrated 5-year work plan when over the 5 years, we on average are meeting that annual goal that you set for us. So because in a given year you may have costs that go up or down or et cetera, and so it kind of balances out over the 5 years is how we look at that. And when we begin the programming process, we allocate funds according to the capital allocation methodology that you've directed us, which is what we have here. This is what we talked about last year with the commission and how you directed us to proceed. Ultimately, our first and primary responsibility is to meet the obligation of the funding that we receive. For example, the vehicle registration fee had some ballot commitments related to safe routes to school and congestion relief, and so we make sure that we are meeting those first. We also have requirements associated with our impact fee collections and having the general funds to pay for the non-impact fee eligible components of that. And so that is one of those obligations that we have to do. And so that's where we go first. Then we talk about the safety and maintenance activities, and then we get down into the system enhancements, where we fund additional community programs activities, those neighborhood plan projects, the bike master plan. This is where the commission directive from last year of the additional $3 million comes from in that category, as well as those non-impact fee eligible capital improvement plan projects. And as we're funding or programming projects, we go down the list. We take the revenue that we'll talk about later, and we start allocating, meeting those targets until we get to the end and the money runs out, which usually runs out somewhere down in this third category. We'd love it if it just kept going, but it doesn't. Looking at the first budget adjustment and where we sit according to these targets, this is what we have. The annual targets that we were working off of last year are here in this annual target column, 5-year targets here, as well as what the programming breaks out to. As far as those obligations we have, over the 5-year period, we're meeting all of those with the exception here under impact fees. And why are we not hitting that one? That's the first question there. Based on commission direction, we increased the projection or the amount programmed of impact fee eligible expenses in the integrated 5-year work plan. But it's a good thing. We've had additional revenue come in the impact fees over what we expected, and we've had bids come in lower than expected, than budgeted. And so that creates a difference there, and that's why we're over the 5 years we're not hitting that, but that'd be something we'd correct through this update, and we'll talk about that moving forward in this presentation. Then we're meeting those primary focus categories. Some of these, you note, are minimums. So for safety, it's a $1 million minimum per year towards those activities, because we don't want to defer make the safety activities if there's a need to take care of those sooner. And then when we get down to the secondary focus, you'll notice we're about $3 million over in the core community programs. That would be with the commission direction last year to allocate an additional $3 million towards that. So that brought us over the target by $3 million, and we're still, as we've discussed over the last number of years, not fully funding that build out of the CIP. So we'll talk about these 3 key points: our impact fee program, our bridge program, and our community programs. And we'll talk about some of the ideas and issues and concerns that we have, and maybe some modifications in those. So the first thing we just want to talk about is our impact fee loan balance. This is a topic we discussed in great detail last year, and as noted, we sought to increase the impact fee eligible expenses in the program because of it. But as of first quarter this year, we're sitting at a $2.9 million loan balance, which For Christie and I, that gets us a little bit, nervous. That's a lot lower than we expected to be at this point in time. Again, it's for those positive things of having more revenue from impact fees come in, and those bids coming in low, but we're sitting at a lower point than we expected to be. And so that creates the realization that likely by 2021, we're gonna hit that zero, which everyone loves to have.
Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, I just, regarding that, what you just said about lower than expected due to high impact fee collections and low bids, and our first quarter balance is 2.9. Could you kind of do the math for me about why high impact fee collections and low bid results in a lower balance?
Cause you're paying enough, hasn't it?
Hello? Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner Arnold.
Yes, absolutely, I'll do that math. So our loan balance is a general fund loan to the impact fee program. The
Right.
size of the loan was created by putting general funds in there, to pay for impact fee eligible expenses. When we collect impact fees that we are not able to expend on impact fee eligible, costs within a given year, those contribute back towards that balance and lower the number. So when you have more impact fees and lower costs, lower impact fee eligible costs, that delta pays down the balance. Is that more clear?
I'm sure I know this, it's just, and I'm sure I know why, but I'm having a hard time, but keep going, I'll take it.
Okay. The concern we have with hitting that zero mark in 2021 is that takes away from you, the commission, your flexibility with your general fund, right? You have impact fees you're collecting, you have to match them in order to build those projects. In order to pay for all of those, your community programs, or your sidewalks, your bike facilities, some of the maintenance activities and other things that come along with those major capital expansions to make them complete projects. And so staff is, in looking at this, we definitely recommend that we need to be more aggressive. We need to look at over-programming, some of those impact fee eligibility, or programming more than we're anticipating in revenue, in order to make sure that we stay above and beyond in that case, above that line, and keep that flexibility for the commission.
Madam President?
Commissioner Baker?
Ryan, if you don't have the match, how can you be more aggressive in programming projects if you don't have the match? You'll never be able to accomplish them.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Baker, this is where those priorities come into play. When we talk about going down the list of where we allocate funds first, that is an obligation we have. And that would come far before we run out of money. And so the intent would be that we pay for those before we get into the rest of the activities, and make sure that we are hitting that.
And when you say rest of the activities, what do you mean?
Your primary focus and your secondary focus, so your maintenance, your core community programs, your non-impact fee eligible costs.
Right, but what you're saying then is that impact fee eligible projects should be more important to fund than maintenance? I mean, theoretically?
Madam President, Commissioner, that was based on the revenue allocation methodology that the commission gave us last year. We have obligations associated with the impact fee revenue we receive. We have to match those in order to build those projects and expend those. Otherwise,
Right,
those fundings
I would think you would never take it out of maintenance. I mean, it makes no sense to build new projects and ignore the maintenance issues of the projects that are already in the ground. Because then you just get behind, and quite frankly, at that point, impact fees cannot be used to do maintenance. So I understand the tension, but I would never put impact fee over maintenance. I would over the other things, yeah, but I think if
Director Wong.
Madam President, Commissioner Baker, no, you're absolutely right. That's not what the staff is suggesting at all. Again, we're not talking about revenues at this point in time, but what we are saying is that based on the allocations that the commission has established, that yes, we would be coming to the commission with a different look at what type of projects, not maintenance, that we would be able to recommend that the commission is funded based on what we have in the general fund. So impact fee eligibles would most likely be high priority, or the requirements that we have by statute, and all other projects that are not in that ballot, in that bucket, would then take a secondary seat. If we came to that, again, that's a big if. We're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination. That is going to be determined after, and we have a lot of homework to do on what our revenue allocations are. This is strictly about looking at the operational targets, putting those on the tip. Does that clarify that, Commissioner?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
However, I don't think you can talk about I don't think we can just set aside the talk of revenues when we have to bring all the same things. And I think we need to keep always at the top of our head, you know, the fact that we don't have all the money to do everything we want, but we need to make some decisions. And some of those decisions can't be made on feelings or emotion. I mean, they have to be made on actual facts, which is if you don't maintain what you got, it doesn't matter how many new projects you build, you're going to be in the hole.
No, there's absolutely no argument whatsoever on that. Again, this is a presentation just to review where we are when it came down to the specific buckets. I'm not supposed to use the word buckets according to our accounting team here, but on where we are on categories. You're right. The revenue allocation discussion is very important, but again, that's the next step, and we will not come to the commission without having a balanced, fully vetted staff review come to you and say, here's what this looks like, where would you like us to go?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question, because really I want to make sure that is a clear point. Really, we want to understand these things. We're making recommendations, but ultimately our ability to meet them, we will check when we start talking about revenue, and we want to inform that revenue conversation with, this is where you will see challenges in meeting the goals that you set, Commission. So, as we moving on to this next point, which is slide 8, and that really is just we want to give the Commission a heads up. This is ultimately a long-term view, but in 2028, the vehicle registration fee that was passed by the public is set to it will sunset. And so, absent any action by the Commission to work to get the voters to renew that or to modify that in any way, that $13 million would go away, and we would have challenges in implementing our CIP as well as our Safe Routes to School program, which is funded out of those funds. And so the last time this occurred, this took 7 years to pass. We are roughly about a little over 7 years till that time, and so we wanted to make sure this is in front of the Commission so you can have conversations on how you want to proceed with that. Moving on to our minor bridge program.
Comment or question. Might it not be in our best interest to start to publicize that fact now so that the public understands, and this is stretching it out a ways, what a huge mistake they made in not rewriting this registration fee program that we have. I mean, 2028, they're done. That means their kids, the old geezers, the bicyclists get to bounce off of more bumpers into caskets. And I don't think they understand that.
If I could.
Director
Commissioner Goldthorpe, good point. I think your point is, I think it's important to get on this early and start that discussion soon. And if the Commission wants us to move in that direction, we are ready to do that, but that's why we wanted to tee this up for you now, based on understanding, your and the commission's perspective. That, it took 7 years, the last time. I don't think any of us were here for that, and such, but, maybe some of the older heads in the back there, but,
You could feel that energy, right?
But I think, again, your point is very, very well taken, and so, again, that's why it's on the table, now that.
Oh, a big part of the reason why I say that is that night I sat in at CUNA City Hall with my legislators from my district and heard two of them, complete ignoramuses where it concerns transportation issues. And any of this stuff, tell me that we were wasting impact fees because we could spend them any way we wanted without any matches or anything else, and then tell me that we in Ada County don't do our share in providing for the gas taxes for the state and everything else that we get back. In fact, every dime we contribute from the legislature into our coffers, both of which is utter BS. And so that's a big part of the problem, is that level of arrogance and ignorance on their part. As a result of that evening, two people stepped forth and said, I'm fed up with these guys, I'm running against them. And that needs to happen a whole lot more.
Well, from a political perspective, we'll leave that to you, this side
well,
of the table.
that's where I come from,
right.
and and then they do something this year like what we've got in Representative Moyle's bill that gives absolutely does absolutely nothing with the issue of property taxes that we spend or that we pay for the majority of them, which is for schools, and instead points the finger at us and every other government agency, whether or not we spend our money wisely. No concern to them. So, I mean.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I don't want to cut you off, Commissioner Booker, but I want to make sure Ryan gets through his presentation and we can address more of this later. But I do think it's in the whole spirit of transparency that we have this dialogue.
Just one quick comment. I do think we need to start the conversation and start planning for putting that registration fee back on the ballot. I think we're probably a little late to try to do that this year, but probably 2 years down the road, we should make sure we get that back on the ballot.
Yeah, I agree, and that's what I was just starting to say, that now's the time to have that conversation and make sure the public is aware. So I think we can carry that message.
So just a few more items to talk through, and then we want to open this up for a little bit more conversation on what your goals should be. Are we at the right place with your goals? The next is our minor bridge program. This is really your culverts, your pipes, those types of things. The goal that has been set historically on that is $3 million. It was envisioned in the strategic plan that would need to increase as we look at different issues. Talking to the program manager, the recommendation is that this be the time that we increase that at least to $3.5 million. There's some reasons why, as we tightened the belt last year and looked at our accounting and how do we account for costs, it got a little bit tighter in that program, and so this is where we feel like we need to are recommending an increase of at least to $3.5 million per year. And just an example of that here, this is a pipe that should be connected that is over time is no longer. As you also can see some of the rusting and other things, and this is pretty standard out there, and that we see this to be a growing problem. Also wanted to put out here the targets for community programs. This has been a topic of conversation for the commission a lot over the last number of months, and so we just wanted to highlight this. Those items above the line are those funding obligations we have. Our safe sidewalk program, that's our ADA implementation, our primary tool for that. And looking at that, we have a goal right now of $1 to $2 million a year. We're kind of maxed out at 1.6 because our two people who are running that program can only run so many contracts in a given year. So that's where we're maxing out within that program. Our Safe Routes to School, that dollar figure was set by the ballot. The number somehow is different than on the page. The ones on your page are correct. This 1.6 million is what we're seeing, or 16.1 million over the next 5 years. We've been looking at the numbers, and that's where we're seeing for the next 5 years. Under that line, core community programs that's where the commission's discretion and has the decision on this one. The commission has directed 5% of our capital budget to go towards community programs. Again, these are those neighborhood plans, the agency requests that we get over and above the Safe Routes to School that we already fund through VRF. That's another $16.1 million that we're talking about. In addition, I just want to highlight for the commission that about 15% of our road and intersection projects, these are your arterial projects where you have the greatest amount of volume, you know, with the pedestrians, where probably sidewalks and bike facilities are the most important to have. About 15% of those projects also provide bike and pedestrian facilities, which equates over the 5 years to about $30 million more dollars. So you're looking at roughly about $60 million plus that you would be looking at for community programs. Just wanted to highlight those points at this point. And then we just want to bring forward now, open this up for a commission discussion. Up on the screen you have our recommendation, which includes that addressing that impact fee, which we're saying we bring our collections and our match, and then we over program to some extent there, as well as that bridge increase that we're recommending to you. But this is what we're putting forward, but look to you for any direction on any adjustments that the commission would like to make.
Question: when would you like from the commission an idea of what kind of funding we would like to see happen with regards to additional gap type projects?
That would be today. That is why we're here.
Commissioner, just point of clarification. The list that you gave me is going to take me over 2 years to get through. I don't have the bandwidth to do anything else. So once I get through the list, that for the most part is in the integrated 5-year work plan, then we'll be able to come back to you folks and get some additional projects.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about integrated 5-year work plan projects.
The gap list that you gave us,
yeah.
Most of those projects were already in the integrated 5-year work plan. We just pulled those forward to get them accomplished.
And then we pulled out ones that would not require right-of-way and other types of additional
We pulled out 2 because when we went into scope them, they were beyond the limits that you folks set.
What I meant was we took projects that did not include all that kind of additional funding.
No, some of the gap projects do require us purchasing right away.
I know.
So
I know. I'm not going to argue about that. What I want to make a point of is that we don't want to stop what we did last year, I don't believe.
I can't do any more until I finish the list that you gave us.
Okay, we can modify that list. That's why we've asked people for more input today.
So if I've already expended money on some of the projects that you've given us, and now you want to pull them off, is that what I'm understanding?
No, we need to have that discussion because we haven't had it yet.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Are you saying as we get the input now from all the different entities out there that we may want to look at the list that has not already
Yes.
Been obligated and then maybe reprioritize?
Yes.
Madam President, Commissioners, and what we tried to address last month, and what our hope is, the most logical process to address these is through the integrated 5-year work plan. If you want additional projects to be completed, the best way is to look at your goal, and if you want to address that goal and add additional projects or do something like that, getting them in through the integrated 5-year work plan is that way. And we're looking at those projects and saying, which ones could we move ahead faster? Which ones could we do?
I think we're not understanding the whole point of last year's $3 million. It wasn't to accelerate what's already on the 5-year work plan. We asked for $3 million additional dollars for additional projects or accelerations, and that's where I'm continuing from.
Mr. Daigle?
Commissioner, my point again is virtually every project that you have on that list was already in the integrated 5-year work plan. We just brought them forward.
Understood, but we're not spending any additional monies that way, are we?
Yes, we are. I have an additional $3 million that I put in that pot.
For
so
this
we can
year.
move
That
those
enables you
forward
to-
to get those accomplished.
Okay, then all we need really to do is decide if that 3 million is enough and if we want to change any of the priorities.
You can change the priorities, I got no more money other than that 3 million, sir.
Well, you know, that's kinda interesting, cause you keep telling us that you have whatever we give you.
If you, when we come to the budget discussion, if you guys say that you'd like to take the 3% plus new construction, we probably have as much money as we need. But, I will remind you, as we get to that point, we're gonna give you that budget, but then we're just gonna have to start lining things off the bottom if we don't take the 3% plus new construction. You wanna take new construction? Some of the projects will come off. As you said, I only have what you give me.
Understood, and what I'm getting at is that whether or not that happens, as far as the 3% or new construction, we can line stuff out anyway if we consider it more important.
You have that power, that's absolutely true.
Correct.
That's where I was going.
Yeah, and then we'll take a good scrub, look at the list as we can from everybody as they come in. Director Long, did you have a
No, I was gonna basically say exactly what the commissioner just said. You have that authority. This is what the staff will do, and they always do a tremendously great job at this. They will bring you this first step, then we'll bring you the funding piece. And then we will sit back and say, here are your options, and then we're gonna step back, and then the commission will determine at that point where you want Ada County Highway District built. Understanding is, I know you all do very, very well, but there is no free lunch on these things. So if you go in this direction, then we'll come back and say, here's the impact, what do you want to do? But it's in your control, and we'll make sure you have all the information in plenty of time. That's why we're starting early this year to accommodate all of the inputs at the commission level.
We're at that critical juncture, and we
Yeah.
appreciate the update. Commissioner Haynes?
Yeah, I'm taking the approach a little differently. The existing 5-year work plan provides the priorities. So I've been digging into it, with people in the neighborhoods and looking at the existing projects and applying the measurements of safety and how can we use what we've already got more efficiently and effectively by the way we scope those projects. How do we make them safer, more connected? How do we reduce speeding? Because the projects are sort of set out separately, and I was hoping there was some way we could do it internally, but I'm just doing it with the neighborhoods on my own, is how do we make this project even more effective in providing, maybe it's a sidewalk project, but there ought to be, well, while we're there, what do we do to reduce speeding? Because we got reports of speeding on this road, but it's not a traffic calming project. Or it's an ADA project, and it's near a bus connectivity. How do we enhance that so that little extra connectivity enhances the mobility of people with disabilities? So there's all kinds of things to do. The way they're described in the 5-year work plan or on the website, which is cool, is very limited, and so I'm hoping we can enhance those in a way that, it might require a little more scoping. I'd rather put the money in scoping those projects to make them use the existing infrastructure more efficiently and effectively and safer for safety and health. The thing though that I would disagree on this is that there's a tendency to say, well, because we have the money, we have to spend it. And I've raised this many times. The impact fee statute does not give us the flexibility to provide an investment that provides a return, both in terms of using existing infrastructure more efficiently and effectively or enhancing safety. And so I would not support using more property tax money. If we cannot spend it, we can't, and I know that it's like, that means reducing the impact fee. That's what we have to do, because the statute's too narrow to be effectively used. Just because we get the money doesn't mean we have to spend the money on something that will obligate us for much higher maintenance obligations and tie up resources with our property taxes that we could be using to enhance. The impact fee statute assumes growth is not going to affect any of the current infrastructure. We can only use that money to create new infrastructure, And looking at the reports from Compass, every time they talk about the new capital expansions that would occur in the valley, they then say these are the maintenance obligations which far exceed our capacity to meet those maintenance obligations. So we do create a much greater debt in the future, and if the flaw is in the statute, then we just have to bite the bullet and say, we're not gonna create a bunch of new infrastructure, and if the only avenue is to reduce the impact fee, that's the only avenue we can take, because we can't spend it on the things that we ought to be doing. So there is another approach in order to free up the property tax, and that is to reduce the impact fee.
Thank you, Commissioner Hazen.
And that's the approach I would take.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, I have to disagree with Jim. Okay, I'm gonna make two different comments. They may seem contradictory, but whatever. So first of all, regarding impact fees, we need to, the whole reason impact fees were put into place was because people said and still feel that, growth needs to start paying its way. And we all know that impact fees and growth do not pay their way 100%. But if we were to sit there and tell the public, okay, we're not collecting impact fees, so your roads are going to continue to be congested. They're going to be, we're not going to widen out the farm to market roads in the new growth areas like Star and Cuna and South Meridian and North Meridian. Sorry, we're not going to do that. That would be ridiculous. We told people understand that impact fees are one way of growth paying itself. And so we're collecting them, we need to spend them, we need to spend them wisely, I will agree. But regardless, we're not going to be able to march up to the legislature and dictate to them how we want to spend our impact fees. We can work with them to try to change it, but that's a tough road to hoe. So my concern is that, while maintenance is our top priority, impact fees need to be the second priority that gets fulfilled, whether it's through property tax, sales tax, or whatever other kind of revenue stream we have in order to match that. The second thing goes along with what Kent was saying about the GAP project. And I'm not going to get into, whether it should be in the 5-year work plan or whatever. All I know is I have a GAP project. I want to put a marker down right now. And, it needs to, I think, be integrated in the plan. You all saw the tell us from the guy who lives on Maple Grove. Maple Grove was supposed to be widened. It is not going to be widened now. It's an arterial. It's congested. There's a lot of people kids use that road in order to go to school, to wait for the bus. And so there's only sidewalk, and it's a minimum 3-foot sidewalk on the east side of Maple Grove, which is continuous. On the west side of Maple Grove, between Eastgate and Millen, it is not continuous. It needs to be filled in. If we can, this is way more important a facility than that thing on the north side of McMillan that border the canal.
Amen.
So this is a really important GAP project that needs to be done. I don't know how you allocate it or whatever, but that's one of the ones that I'm going to be looking at. And now I understand it's probably two contradictory things, but you can hold two opposing thoughts in your mind at the same time, and that's what I did. Thank you.
We did address that earlier this morning, Commissioner Baker, after our conversation. So, just so you know.
Okay. I guess I don't understand, but.
No, I brought it up. We had a preliminary discussion that was a project that you were looking at having on the list.
Okay. I just want to get it on the record.
Right. Good. Appreciate that.
Okay. So just wanted to, as we finalize this, just highlight that we have our public open house next week, and we have that deadline coming up for those types of requests. So we're happy to take them anytime before that for trying to incorporate them into this year's integrated 5-year work plan. And then we'll be back over the next few months to talk further about those priorities and the revenue side of things. With that, take any more comments or questions?
Any other questions? Commissioner Arnold? No? I think we're good,
No, I
Brian.
don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Now we will just move right into call everything to order for our three commissions.
One housekeeping. Commissioners, you can just stay on this line. We're going to just tap the auditorium into the same conversation, so you will not need to hang up and redial. You'll just stay in this conference.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other housekeeping, or do you want just, any concerns or comments on the, agenda? No regular agenda items this week, just our.
No, I'm glad we're filling those spots on the pedestrian, and you and I sat in on the bike advisory. So I assume we can just move on fill the two vacancies now and deal with the other. I think that was what they asked on that. Can
I
you get
think
that done in the next week?
I think they were recommending that they do that rather than address the bylaws. So I think we're going to have a presentation. I'm not sure, is it going to be next week with Ryan? He was going to come back and.
It'll be with me.
We had all these applicants, they went through
Oh,
a couple
yeah,
weeks ago.
I'm sorry.
That's all
Yeah.
right.
Is that on the agenda for next?
It'll be the week after.
The week
Yeah,
after.
we'll have a work session and then a last.
It just makes sense to fill those vacancies for the meet again in April instead of delaying it yet. So they only meet once a month. Fill those two vacancies, and then our recommendation is they add 3 more seats, fill those 3 vacancies by May. So, but at least, and that was their recommendation. So it seems to me that since everybody's,
So we'll get
there's a huge number of applicants, they set some priorities, so it's just sitting in, I guess at our level, waiting for us to
I don't
make
think
those 2
it's been,
appointments.
it's been, put out there to us yet, but we've got that coming up, so we'll look at the agenda coming up, but thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
It was a good meeting. Director Wong.
Thank you. Commissioners, a couple things before we break out to the, first off, next Thursday, I believe is the Idaho Business, News Women of the Year Awards. Brooke Green has been nominated and selected. I'd like to know, and I need to know now, if you're going to attend. We reserved X number of seats.
I'm sorry.
It's Women of the Year for
Oh,
Brooke Green.
for Brooke.
What day?
I think it's next Wednesday or Thursday? Wednesday.
Wednesday,
Time?
the 11th.
Yeah, Wednesday
It's at the
11th.
Grove. I believe it's the East Grove, but I will confirm all that.
5?
It starts at 5:30. It has cocktail hour, then dinner, and then the presentation.
So,
Do you have to stay for dinner? Can you
Say
come
again?
for the presentation?
Will you not come for the dinner?
I'd like to go.
okay, if you're in,
Yeah.
You're in.
Nice.
And
Commissioner,
3 of us.
you know,
3 of you, okay?
Commissioner Arnold?
I probably will not attend. I may be out of town, dealing with a family situation, so I probably won't attend.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to remind the commissioners, and that's why you have them here, is today is National Oreo Cookie Day. So I didn't get out of the building there without jumping on. I'd like to say first, before I go further, thank you. I will not be in the building Thursday, Friday, or Monday. And such, Paul David will have the reins, but thank you. Now, something more pleasant, the coronavirus. As you saw in my notes earlier this week, we've been taking, meeting with the teams, executive team on action items that we may be taking internally. We have some handouts for you that may help you in some of the discussions you'll be having as elected officials. But at the end of the day, what we are, and this is from the Central District Health, these right here, we are dealing in facts. We're not dealing in rumors, we're not dealing in scare tactics, we're not dealing in in operations that that are not based on facts. Internally, we've already taken the appropriate steps that I think any smart organization would do. We'll be meeting shortly to talk about, as different organizations meet this week, next week, what role the Ada County Highway District might be playing if things progress to a point where they become more serious. The team internally, we thought it was a great idea to review our standing flood operations. Why? Our flood operations are built to the point of taking people and putting them in different areas and continuing to maintain the operational capability of the Ada County Highway District if we were not able to all be here. So we think that'll be a good match in case something happens for the coronavirus. We also, as we've already identified all the we'll call it special needs. It's not the right term, but the more folks that are maybe need a little bit more help in operations. We know where those areas are, so we'll be focusing a little bit more on that. We are going to look at what happens if people start closing down. How does that affect the Ada County Highway District and our ability? And do we respond to certain areas? We've already talked to our team members about some of the tell some of the travel that they're already looking at for training in certain areas. I see no reason to send people into areas where if there is a designated factual concern on the coronavirus, it doesn't make sense. The training is not that important at that point in time. And so we're working through how do we operate the district if I have to have people at home? How do we operate the district if the city of Kuna or Boise has an issue and they need our assistance in certain things? How do we maintain health and operations here? I've asked our head of HR to also take that next step. We're pretty good about managing and leading our group here, but at the same token, we employ a lot of temps. Do we have the same focus from the temp organizations that we have here at the Ada County Highway District? If it comes down to that point, we're going to look through that as we move forward. So, in a nutshell, more to follow for you all on this, but again, we are proactively taking the appropriate steps. We are not in a panic mode by any stretch of the imagination, and we'll be dealing with facts, but I thought some of this reading material would be helpful
Very good. Thank
when
you.
you have those discussions with your other elected officials. This is your impact fee report card and such, and I'll draw your attention to City of Meridian again, outpacing everybody both on in residential and commercial, and Garden City has had no residential hits at this point in time. So, in a nutshell, that's all I have for you for now.
Any questions
Again, I
or
just want
comments
to
for Director Wong?
say thank you.
3 minutes, commissioners.
Okay.
3 minutes.